Away.
Hello, Fearless community. Thank you for being with us today. So today we're all going to be looking at what's funny. And you know where the belly laugh is? It's in the belly. So what we're going to do first, we're just going to find ourselves in what is comfortable for you. Trying to have everything open. If your ankles are crossed over, if your knees are crossed over, just allowing everything to uncross. And now we're going to put our focus on our breath and just breathe down into your belly. And just feel the difference when you stop and all you have to do is breathe into your belly. Today we're working towards belly laughs, so we're going to warm up that belly with our breath. And we're going to warm up our smile. So continue to breathe into your belly and just smile. Grin, make a funny face. Do something that's going to shift your energy. You may just want to wink at someone on the Zoom, if you dare. Connected to breath, deep into that belly and smiling. Now what we're going to do to ground ourselves in today is we're going to acknowledge that not everything is funny. There can be some tension going around. So we're just going to breathe into acknowledging that there's some stuff going on in the world. And we're just going to let that out on the out breath. And we're going to return to that smile. Now breathe in and allow the dropping in of a time, whether it's recent or when you were a kid or whether it was sometime in 2010, but allow a moment when you were in belly laugh to drop in, for that memory to come back. Who were you with? What were you laughing about? And just go into the memory and the sensation of that as you breathe into that belly, as we warm it up to get ready for the funny, the comedy, the laughs, and just breathe into the knowing that before you know it, you just may be laughing again. And today we're bringing the funny into your speaking. We're here with Ben. We're so happy that you're all here. Welcome to today's Fearless Chat. Belly's ready.
Yes. So thank you so much for that grounding meditation, Deborah. If this is your first time on a Fearless Communicators call, this gesture we call elevated sparkleation. It is a way of celebrating joy and sharing love and light. So I invite you to elevated sparklate as you feel so inspired. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Eduardo Placer. I have the privilege of being the founder of Fearless Communicators. I am a story doula, international public speaking coach. We work with thought leaders on what they say and how they say it. And this Fearless Chat journey began back in March as we were approaching the shutdown of everything around us. And we knew that what we could do was gather our community together in a space of sharing resources, sharing knowledge, sharing information, sharing practical tips and tools, celebrating, and really use this as a platform to showcase the thought leadership of the various people in our community. So Johanna de Reuter, Amy Noel, Kate Ekman, Valerie Lyons, various speakers, women who participated in our programs, we have featured over the course of our journey. And one of the things that was missing was where are we showcasing the public speaking piece of it. We were highlighting all these other these pieces. We've talked about race and racism and equity. We've talked about mental health. We've talked about pivoting businesses. We've talked about getting shit done. And an opportunity to really land into how can we use this also as a platform to share tools and tips to elevate how we show up in the space of speaking. So what you're seeing is the culmination of a 3-part series. I began having a conversation about how we can steal from the best. Pablo Picasso has a very famous quote, which is good artists steal, good artists borrow, great artists steal. So how could we watch and observe people who are extraordinary in their speaking, see what they're doing technically and apply that to our own speaking. And then Deborah last week had a fabulous conversation, which was around storytelling and what differentiates a good story and a thrilling story, and looking at neuroscience and how we can mine neuroscience to understand how we can activate and trigger not only our brain, but the brain of our audience so that what we say reverberates with them and resonates with them. And then there was an opportunity to think about, I have a feeling that people want to know how to be funny. And what a treat that Benjamin Pelteson is one of our fearless facilitators. Ben and I not only are dear friends, but we both were actors at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival together. And we went on a school visit program together in a car where we discovered that we have the same exact mother, and performed Shakespeare and little skits in middle schools and high schools in the greater Oregon and Seattle area. And was the beginning of a beautiful relationship and friendship. And so honored to have you on our Fearless team and to give us some really powerful frameworks and tools in this conversation on how to be funny. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, lots of pressure there. Hashtag no big deal. I can see the facial expressions and the gestures. We're going to do a lot of elevated sparklation as we pass the conversation to Mr. Ben Pelteson. Take it away. Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Thank you so much. This is a total fucking nightmare. Eduardo asked me to do this a couple of weeks ago and I was like, no, I quit. And he was like, in this economy? And I said Thursday, 5 p.m. And so here we are. We're going to talk about how to be funny. The title of this presentation is There's Nothing to It. Put the funny in your public speaking. That's a picture of Fran Lebowitz, who's the funniest person I could think of in the background. She should be doing this presentation today, but she knows better, so I'm going to do it instead. Now, as we all know, analyzing humor is like dissecting a frog. Few people are interested, and the frog dies. This, of course, is a famous quote by E.B. White, the author of Charlotte's Web, a hilarious novel about the death of an arachnid. I wanted to let you know what you're into today. This is what we're getting into. These are your trigger warnings, okay? There will be cursing in the next 45 minutes. There will be a brief discussion of European continental philosophy, and then there will be an absolutely filthy story told by a British character actress. Now, if this is something that's going to bother you, if you're like a little squeamish about this stuff, like I celebrate the you that is now. If this is not part of your personal journey, like take a break. This might be a great time to, excuse yourself from the webinar because this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at funny people being funny. We're going to try and figure out what makes them funny. And then I'm going to share some philosophy of humor with you. So over the centuries, there have been people who obviously were trying to procrastinate from doing things that they actually needed to do. So they sat around and came up with philosophies of why different shit is funny and different shit is not funny. And we're going to focus on the funny. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to tell you a story. And this is a story about a production of Dracula. That's me in a production of Dracula, but it's not about this production, okay? This is a story that I was told 15 years ago on a break during a terrible production of Hamlet. And I love it so much. It's so stupid. It is my go-to story whenever I'm at a boring dinner party, stuck with someone who just has nothing to say. And it goes like this. So there's these actors, and they're out doing this production of Dracula in the middle of nowhere, right? They're in the middle of like Arkansas, Mississippi, tiny little theater. And the way that this production of Dracula is supposed to work, the lights go out and stage management cues thunder, lightning, and then from the back of the auditorium, Dracula is on a zip line over the heads of the audience. And he whooshes over the heads of the audience with his cape fluttering in the wind. And then stage management cues a set of double doors as if by magic when he gets to the stage and he flies through them. So they do this on opening night And everyone is, oh my God, it's the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Can you believe, oh my, I was so terrified. It was wonderful. And it's a wonderful opening night, and the cast goes out, and they, in the way of all New York actors who are on the road, get absolutely shit-faced drunk. They drink until they don't remember their own names, and they're out until 4 o'clock in the morning. And of course, actors overdo it at an opening night party. They forget that they have a matinee the next day at 1:30 in the afternoon. So these guys are coming in the next day, and they're kind of staggering into work, and they're putting on their makeup, and Dracula's getting his cape on, and he puts on his fake teeth, and he gets this call to go to his place, and he goes up to the back of the auditorium, and he's starting to feel a little queasy, and he's feeling like, I don't know. And he turns to the stage manager who's in the booth right next to him, and he says, I really don't think I should. And stage management says, go. And there's thunder and there's lightning, and it's as if time stops, and Dracula's on the zip line, and he looks down at all of the white hairs of the audience below him, because it's a Sunday matinee and everyone's a little old, and he projectile vomits. He starts just puking and puking and puke all over these poor people, and they're sitting, what's going on? Is it raining? I don't understand. And he's still Dracula, so he's trying to pass it off like, oh, it's part of the show. And stage management is laughing so hard that they don't cue the set of double doors. So he slams into the set of double doors, and then like a cartoon, he just kind of slowly fades down. And then there's a horrible pause, and the stage manager, oh, right, I have to press a button, and presses a button, but the double doors don't work. Just one of them slowly starts to open, and Dracula crawls through that door. And that's how the show begins. So that's one of my favorite stories. Okay, that is, yay, sparkulation. So if you found that story funny, I want to pick it apart. What were the moments in that story that you laughed, and why? And put that in the chat.
Okay, great. And I will read some of those chat pieces and feed them to you, Ben. I don't know why projectile vomit always gets me.
Always like, funny.
I was like, that just.
Did it not work? What happened?
I vomited on the vice president of Comedy Central, and that ended one angle of my trajectory of a career. So I'll just go back to mute.
Wait, I want to hear that story. The building up, knowing what he's going to do.
So hungover, the hot mess was relatable. So there was the relatedness to knowing, having been there. When Dracula is at the top of the theater, I just knew what was going to happen. So there was a setup that you knew how it was going to go one way, right? Several places, love the slam into the door, the white head of the audience, the schadenfreude, like the pain, pretending it's part of the show, like passing it off as this is part of the show. The anticipation of them getting drunk and knowing it was downhill after that. Yeah. I don't think I should do this in the drinking, like the thought process, wait a second, I don't know if I should do this before they do. The build up, knowing what he is going to do. The physicality of the telling, the vulnerability can be funny. Yeah.
The setup, I love, Mandy's the stage manager, and she says the setup of the double doors at the beginning, knowing it's going to be bad. Like that is an experienced professional who's like, yeah, as soon as you know that that's on a button, that's not going to work. How much I enjoyed telling the story. Great. Yeah. So I'm going to, what I want to do is kind of synthesize a few things. I'm going to go back to the screen share. And I'm going to talk about something that kind of came up as a trend, which was the anticipation of the horrible thing. We could see it coming, and then it inevitably started to kind of tumble out. So the first theory of comedy that I'm going to talk about is called the relief theory of comedy. So this was actually Sigmund Freud's theory. There were a few other people who actually had the idea before him, but he's the one you'll know. He's the name you'll know. And the idea behind this theory is that when we laugh, it's because we accumulate all of this nervous energy, right? And like it gets to a point where in order for us to laugh, it's a relief, right? So this quote, right, is about the fact that a sigh of relief is very similar biologically to a laugh, right? It's the same muscles are working, right? So I want to apply this now, this theory, this relief theory of comedy, to public speaking. So if you're giving a speech and at home, you're like, this is a pretty funny story. I'm like, you know, I'm really feeling myself. And you get in front of a crowd and you're like, story, it's funny, right? And they go, no, that wasn't that funny. It may be that you haven't built the tension in that story to a high enough point, right? In order to take us on the roller coaster ride of laughter, what I'm saying is, or what the relief theory of comedy tells us is, you got to make us really sweat, right? You got to build that tension higher and higher and higher until the only thing we can do to release it is to laugh. I'm going to show you another theory of comedy now. We're going to watch Hannah Gadsby, who's like a funny person. Now, there is a secret prize at the end of this TED Talk. What am I doing? Fearless chat. There's a secret prize if you guess the common trend between all of the clips I'm going to show you. Okay, so Hannah Gadsby is a comedian from Australia. She is also a really smart comedian because she tells you jokes and then she tells you how she tells you jokes. So this is from a TED Talk that Hannah Gadsby gave. We're going to just look at the first like 4 minutes of it, and she's going to tell us a joke and explain how she got a laugh. Here we go.
My name is Hannah, and that is a palindrome. That is a word you can spell. It's a word you can spell the same way forwards and backwards, if you can spell. But the thing is, my entire family have palindromic names. It's a bit of a tradition. We've got Mum, Dad, Nan, Pop. And my brother Kayak. There you go, that's just a bit of a joke there. I like to kick things off with a joke because I'm a comedian. Now, there's two things you know about me already. My name's Hannah and I'm a comedian. I'm wasting no time. Here's a third thing you can know about me. I don't think I'm qualified to speak my own mind. Bold way to begin a talk, yes, but it's true. I've always had a great deal of difficulty turning my thinking into the talking. So it seems a bit of a contradiction then that someone like me, who's so bad at the chat, could be something like a stand-up comedian. But there you go. There you go. It's what it is. I first tried my hand at stand-up comedy. See? I first tried my hand at stand-up comedy in my late 20s, and despite being a pathologically shy virtual mute with low self-esteem who'd never held a microphone before, I knew as soon as I walked and stood in front of the audience, I knew, before I'd even landed my first joke, I knew that I really liked stand-up and stand-up really liked me. But for the life of me, I couldn't work out why. Why is it I could be so good at doing something I was so bad at? I couldn't work out. I could not understand it. That is, until I could. Now, before I explain to you why it is that I can be good at something I'm so bad at, let me throw another spanner of contradiction into the work by telling you that as soon, not long after I worked out why that was, I decided to quit comedy. And before I explain that little oppositional cat I just threw amongst the thinking pigeons, let me also tell you this. Quitting launched my comedy career. I really launched it to the point where, you know, after quitting comedy, I became the most talked about comedian on the planet, because apparently I'm even worse at making retirement plans than I am at speaking my own mind. Now, all I've done up until this point, apart from giving over a smattering of biographical detail, is to tell you indirectly that I have 3 ideas that I want to share with you today. And I've done that by way of sharing 3 contradictions. 1, I am bad at talking. I am good at talking. I quit. I did not quit. 3 ideas, 3 contradictions. Now, if you're wondering why there's only 2 things on my so-called list of 3, I'll remind you, it is literally a list of contradictions. Now, the folks at TED advised me that with a talk of this length, it's best to stick with just sharing 1 idea. I said no. Now, what would they know? Now, to explain why I have chosen to ignore what is clearly very good advice, I want to take you back to the beginning of this talk, specifically my palindrome joke. Now, that joke uses my favorite trick of the comedian trade, the rule of 3, whereby you make a statement and then back that statement up with a list. My entire family have palindromic names: Mum, Dad, Nan, Pop. The first 2 ideas on that list create a pattern, and that pattern creates expectation. And then the third thing, bam, kayak, what? That's the rule of 3. 1, 2, surprise, haha. Now, the rule of 3 is not only fundamental to the way, you know, I do my craft, it is also fundamental to the way I communicate. So I won't be changing anything for nobody, not even TED, which I will point out stands for 3 ideas: technology, entertainment, and dickheads.
And there we have it. Okay. So Hannah Gadsby is a genius because she's telling you how she does the thing that she's doing as she's doing it. So what is the main takeaway from this TED Talk so far? And you guys should all watch the full thing when you get a second. I'll send it to you after the thing. But how does Hannah Gadsby say she tells us a joke? She uses what? Put it in the chat.
The rule of 3, Amy Noel, Richard Heller, contradiction.
Yes.
He also says the rule of 3 with the third being the surprise.
That is correct.
Back to the rule of 3. Yep.
Yeah. So this is like this is like the most basic form of joke in the world, right? A rabbi, a priest, and Ryan Philippe walk into a bar, right? 1, 2, surprise, haha. She's given us the formula. And actually, I forget who it was, but somebody hit on something that is the reason why thing that works. And that is the incongruity theory of comedy, right? So what is incongruity? Incongruity is when one thing doesn't go with something else, right? We have 2 things that are alike: Mom, Dad, Nan, Pop, and then we have something different, kayak. We have 2 things that are alike in this image of this kitty. We have the gesture, we have the outfit, and we have the fact that it is a small cat. We laugh because it is a small cat. There's something that doesn't go with these other 2 things. So this is a theory that kind of came around at the same time as the relief theory of comedy. So here's this quote by Immanuel Kant, which says that in everything that is to excite a lively, convulsive laugh, there must be something absurd in which the understanding, therefore, can find no satisfaction. I can't. I really can't. So the deal is just bad jokes, bad dad jokes. I'm going for all of them. I don't care. I have nothing to lose.
We celebrate the bad jokes.
Yes. So I can't. So in order for something to be funny, it has to not make sense a little bit. It has to take us by surprise. If it doesn't take us by surprise, then this theory says not so funny. So if you're like giving a speech, if you're a human giving a speech and someone's giving you that winning piece of advice to start out with a joke, which, you know, go for it if that's your journey. and you're not getting that laugh, it might be because it's one of two things. Something's wrong with the setup, which is actually the most likely culprit, right? The setup is the piece where you're establishing your audience's expectations. 1, 2, you're reinforcing their expectations, or there's not enough distance, there's not enough incongruity between the punchline and the setup, right? So that's something to keep in mind in the public speaking. Now, I'm going to move on. This is the piece that I told you about before, okay? So if dirty things make you upset, this is a good moment to put me on mute, take a little break. This is a 3-minute clip about a story that's being told on the Graham Norton show, which these clips, like if you get into this clip, go on YouTube and go down this rabbit hole, because these people are ridiculously hilarious. This is another example of incongruity done differently. So we saw Hannah Gadsby do like the classic 1, 2, 3. This is something else that's real incongruous. If you're by some kids, you might want to put on some headphones as well. Okay, I'll give you a second to do that. And we're going to do it.
I'm sorry. That's all right. Yeah, listen, we're a bum rush. I don't know. But just before we do, I know, Miriam, you have a story. Is it you in Edinburgh?
I'm going to Edinburgh with my show.
Oh, yes.
And the last time, that's right, the last time I was in Edinburgh, I hope this isn't going to offend anyone.
It's fine, far ahead.
I'm going to be offended. I might.
I hope you won't.
Yeah.
I was walking home late after a show one night, and I was walking through the meadows, which is a kind of field in the middle of Edinburgh, and I heard a rustling above me. Almost everything is above me, actually. And I looked up, and I saw a young man masturbating in the tree.
Yeah, climb up there.
He climbed up, and I said, "What are you doing?"
He said,
And he
"Making
said,
it rain."
I felt concerned.
Yes.
And I said, "What is your occupation?" And he said, "I'm a soldier." And I said, "In the tattoo?" Because you know there's an Edinburgh tattoo.
Yes.
And he said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "Come down at once." So he sort of slid down the tree. And I said, "You know you can get into trouble for doing what you're doing."
Did you do what you did with the painters with him?
You've heard of helping hands, haven't you? You know, yes. I helped him out. He was charming, and I must say, also grateful.
Miriam?
He was a soldier, and you've got to support the troops.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So that's Miriam Margolyes. She's in Harry Potter. She's like a very funny, very bawdy British actress. What I want to do is have a little bit more of a discussion with this clip around what we find incongruous about this person telling this story. So let's put some of that in the chat.
Do you want to go back into the gallery so we can stop the share and let's...
We can stop the share. We can have a discussion.
Yeah, let's have a little discussion. Okay, great. So we're getting, so Billy Joe says, "I love her. She's such a proper lady." Absolutely. Yes, there's something about that. The ambiguity and incredibly suggestive language, all from this little gray-haired lady. Yeah. Also the age difference, like there was something about her age versus the young men who were on the panel also that was kind of fun.
Right. We would an elder to share a story like this. Totally.
Yeah, we would not expect her to tell a story like this. Yeah.
I think there's something also, I just want to add, kind of building off of what Billy Joe is saying, like this posh accent, right? This very classy sounding lady, like she's very fancy. Like if you were just to hear her talk, and so she's telling this filthy story, which is absolutely insane. So there's some kind of like cognitive dissonance. Like if she sounded different, would the story be as funny? I don't think it would. Let's see. You would not expect a lady. It was a surprising topic for her. Logical story on her part. So I love that. So Mandy says, so actually what her point of view is on the story, right? Her point of view is, well, of course I would support the troops by giving this soldier a moment of pleasure in the woods. Like, that's insane, right? She does it very seriously. Of course, it's unexpected. So that is actually what's incongruous about it, right? We're unexpected. We're not expecting someone of her class, someone of her age. She was trying not to be funny, but everything she said had a double entendre, right? So like the worst thing in the world is when somebody's like on stage in a public speech, like trying to be funny, right? Like that's not super great, but she's being quite serious about it. And that really helps us land.
So Ben, I want to click on what Billy Joe said. She just told the story. Yeah. So there was this way in which this is just naturally what happens when you leave the theater, when you're leaving Edinburgh, Scotland, and you're traipsing down the space. Like there's a matter of factness to it, which is also incongruous to like that is not a normal walk in the park, as they say. That is not a usual experience that one would have. Yeah.
So all of these things are incongruous, and Deb's also pointing out, she sets up the tension of the story. So these theories that we're talking about, right, they overlap. There's no like universal, this is the always how to be funny thing, right? There are, and Mandy's pointing out the not normal thing is this guy being up in a tree. You would not expect that as well. That's also incongruous, right? This is all true, but these theories overlap. And this story is actually a great example of another theory. Are you guys getting sick of philosophy yet? I love this stuff. This is called the benign violation theory. So the benign violation theory says, for us to find something funny, it has to violate our expectations of how we think life should be, right? This story does that all over the place. Right? It is not supposed to be the case that an old woman walking in a park would have an encounter with a young soldier in this way, right? All of the things that we've just discussed. That's the incongruous part. But this theory says, in order for it to be funny, it also has to be benign at the same time, right? So what do we mean by benign? It means it occurs at some degree of emotional distance from the event, right? It can't actually threaten, like if she had felt threatened in that moment by this man, it would not have been a funny story. But because she didn't, and she shares it in the way that she does, it produces a laugh. Similarly, like if I told you the Dracula story, and Dracula got a concussion and had to go to the hospital, and was in a coma for 3 weeks and is still on life support, that would not be a funny story, right? Like that's the difference. That's why we laugh at cartoons, but not at real life. So this theory actually says we need these two things to happen at the same time. For us to laugh, it has to violate our expectations, and it has to be kind of benign at the same time. And for me, like this brings up a real question about line drawing when we're giving a speech, right? When you're like out making some jokes, it's very easy to cross lines, and you can feel a room turn against you because you have violated this thing about being benign, about whatever you're joking about occurring at a certain distance from you, from the audience, from who you're speaking to. So, for example, if you happen to be the president of the United States and you're telling a joke about a reporter who has a disability, it's not so benign, right? It is benign for the folks who laughed at that joke, but it's not so benign for a lot of us. So we have to be mindful, like when you're doing this stuff, of what lines are you crossing and what are you really trying to do? Which brings us to our final theory of comedy. Has anyone spotted the trend in the clips yet? What is the trend? Put it in the chat. I want to know.
We'll see if anybody gets it.
Anybody got it?
Women, ladies. Yes, there are definitely all women and their ladies. And
What else? You might not know this about Miriam Margulies, so it's a little bit of a tricky one. I will say that it is
lesbians. Yes, they're lesbians. It's National Coming Out Day. Yes, we're celebrating lesbians. Yay, lesbian Asians.
It was totally
the lesbians on the call are thanking us. Yay.
You're welcome. Totally by accident, but this is just what we ended up with. So now we're going to talk about this last kind of idea. And maybe if there's time, we'll as a group do an exercise after this, because we kind of boogied today in a way that I didn't expect. So
one second, I just want to acknowledge, Jesus just wrote, I work with a very culturally diverse team, and I've learned that the line changes a lot from one culture to another. So I think, I love that it's not like a demarcation, like that's what it is, but it is an ever moving conversation. It's not just like intercultural, but it's also intergenerational, right? There are things that, you know, we laughed at, that our parents laughed at, that we might be offended by. And there are things that we laugh at that Zennials and Millennials are offended by, right? So there are ways in which that line continues to shift and move and evolve. And that's part of like what makes the most sense to be sharing or communicating, or what's the joke that resonates now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say we have to know our audience.
Yeah. So are there, let's dig into that for a second. So are there examples where you've been watching somebody on stage, they're giving you a speech, they're in front of a room, and you've noticed things kind of go over that line? Because I think that might kind of be a good jumping off point. Is anyone comfortable sharing a story about that? Maybe we don't do that in the chat. If somebody wants to unmute, I'd love to hear from somebody about that.
Hi, it's Billy Joe here.
Hey, Billy Joe.
I was on my wife is a singer, and she was performing on a gay cruise. And there was a comic that was up there who decided to tell Asian jokes and Latin jokes, jokes about Latin people. And you could tell that some of the audience, it was perfectly fine for them. That was part and parcel in some ways of a white gay culture. But there were a number of people on the boat, including me and my wife, who were extremely offended by that too. Yeah. So, yeah.
Anybody else? I think it's really instructive, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been seeing that a while, because also like in my previous company, I was working here in Colombia, but it was a US company, so we had a lot of foreigners, and you know, like it here, at least in South America, I don't know if it's in all Latin America, I do think it's in most Latin, like Central and South America, that line is like way further away than for like example Americans. So all the Americans folks at the beginning, they panicked when, you know, they heard like jokes like here you can make fun of everything, and it's, you know, allowed. It's like funny, and actually like people thinks it's funny. But for Americans, for North American people, it's like way out of like above the line. So I've seen it many times, and right now I work with the team like in different parts of the world, and I've been like learning who, and mostly like, you know, with like basically making fun of people. It's in some places, in some cultures it's accepted, in some others it's not. And I would say that know your audience before making these jokes or before putting funny in your speeches, not to, make it not a joke and
Think
bad for
about
some
whether
people.
it's benign, right? Whether it's benign, whether what you're really targeting, because now we're going to talk about jokes that target people, because there is a subset of humor that's about that.
Ben,
Yet-
can I say something, Ben?
Of course, yeah.
That's the tricky thing about humor is subjective.
Mm-hmm.
And you, even if you know your audience, you don't know what is going to offend people, what people are going to get. Because some of the clips that you've shown today, as an African American, I got it, but I know people that wouldn't get any of it, what you showed. They wouldn't even, So the idea that humor is very subjective, and I think knowing your audience makes a difference. And humor is risky. Comedy's risky because you like you did your caveat about what this was going to be about, that some people will be offended. Not everybody will get the joke. I didn't get all the jokes. So it's just interesting to just point to that.
So it is case by case, and there is a risk inherent in what you're doing, but I think we can get a little more fine-tuned about about where those lines might be. And so what I want to do is show you some Wanda Sykes. Okay, this is from a White House Correspondents' Dinner many years ago in happier times. And we're not gonna show you the whole thing because it's long. So bear with me as I get to the right spot. 1 second.
It's somehow listening to the radio and people are dedicating songs. I like to send out Always and Forever to Mr. President. People love you, and even the media. You guys have been very favorable towards the president. It's funny to me that they've never caught you smoking, but they somehow always catch you with your shirt off. I know you're into this transparency thing, but I don't need to see your nipples. Is there a beach at Camp David? What the hell? There was never a nipple portrait of Lincoln. I'm sorry. But this is amazing. The first Black president. I know you're biracial, but
so that is a little bit, right? Who's Wanda Sykes targeting? Barack Obama. Is it benign or not? Put a thumbs up if it's benign. Yeah, great. Yeah, she's making fun of the guy, but it's not mean-spirited, right? And you can tell that there's a certain warmth to what she's saying, right? You can tell that that's done with love and respect. Now we're going to look a little later in this clip at a different bit. 1 second.
And I think, Ben, it's helpful to give the context that the White House Correspondents Association is a roast, right? So people are going there knowing that someone is going to be lampooned. We're going to be making fun of someone. There's like an agreement in the room that that we're here to laugh, right?
Exactly. So this is a little bit later in that set.
Dick Cheney, oh my God, he's a scary man. It scares me to death. I tell my kids, I say, look, if 2 cars pull up and one has a stranger and the other car has Dick Cheney, you get in the car with the stranger. Dick Cheney is trying to defend torture. He goes, yeah, well, they should release the memos to show all that good information we got from our practices. You can't defend torture. That's like me robbing a bank and then going in front of the judge and saying, yes, Your Honor, I robbed the bank, but look at all these bills I paid.
It's a genius bit. Now, obviously, she's punching at a different target here, right? She's punching at Dick Cheney. Do we feel like this is benign or not benign? Benign, not benign. Not benign. Did you laugh?
Yes.
So what the theory that we just looked at said is that for us to laugh, we have to violate expectations, right? You get in the car with the stranger, violates our expectations. And it's benign in the sense that she is punching. If you're someone who has a thing about Dick Cheney, has an opinion about Dick Cheney, where you know, he might be the target of a joke, it is in fact benign to punch up, right? So she's punching at people who have more political power and more literal power than she does, right? So punching up is really easy. You know, as if you're lampooning your boss in a loving way, if you're lampooning a political figure in a loving way, if you're talking about Jeff Bezos who owns billions of dollars of stuff, you do that with a certain good-spirited warmth, that's benign. If you're punching down, which is what I would argue that Jesus was talking about, or what Billy Joe was talking about, where you have a comic who's talking about Asian people or Latino people, that is actually targeting someone who has less kind of political power than I assume that was a white comic you were talking about, Billy Joe? Yeah, right. So there's a certain rebalancing of power that happens in this kind of comedy where you're sending someone up. And so this is actually part of something called the superiority theory of comedy. This is the last one I'm going to share with you today. And this is the oldest one. This is what Plato and Aristotle and Descartes and Thomas Hobbes thought, that the point of comedy was that we laugh at the misfortunes of other people, at the foibles of other people, so that we can feel better about ourselves. It's the meanest theory of comedy. But you can also think about it in a self-deprecating way, right? I make fun of myself to make you feel better about yourself. This is comedy with a target. Now, you have to be careful with this stuff, right? You have to know where those lines of being benign and not benign are. So it's always good when you're doing a public speech to run that past somebody, get somebody's eye on it that you trust, who knows the audience that you're going to go in front of if you're going to do this kind of thing. You are playing with fire, but fire, as Wanda Sykes has shown us, can be kind of fun. So those are the theories of comedy and kind of how to incorporate that into some public speaking. Are there questions that people have in these last few minutes that we've got together that we want to chat about?
If we get off of the shared screen, Ben, then I think we can go
Sure.
back to the gallery.
Yeah.
So both Johanna and Billy are expressing their gratitude and saying this was fabulous. I think it's interesting to start seeing where we can actually, I think it's important to ask why things are funny, right? I think we witness and we experience comedy, but I think sometimes it's helpful for us to dissect and explore and understand why it is that something makes us laugh. Because for comics, or for people who make a career in comedy, or authors, or people who we find funny, they know what they're doing. So there's a purpose to it. There's a strategy in the comedy. And I think that humor and comedy can be a very useful tool for us in our speaking, right? In how we communicate. And I think understanding what those tools are, I think help us be more effective in using humor in our speaking for whatever purpose we want to use that humor for. So I had never heard of these different theories of comedy. So Ben, it's just so helpful to kind of see them kind of broken down in that way. And I think that it's a great space to be in a space of practice about, well, why was that funny? So knowing that you were planning a joke, I know there's some people here who are networkers, right? Who go to networking events and go to networking meetings, right? Understanding, wait a second, someone set this up, that was really funny. Why was that funny? And trying it out for yourself to see, wait a second. And I would say there are ways to, I would start benign. I think benign is a safe place to be. And I think the thing that I'm also noticing is that we live in times that are very complicated, right? And I think we want to be mindful always of our audience and the target of our speaking, right? And understanding the consequences of our speaking, right? So, so humor is a useful tool, and always understand the power of our voice and what it is that is actually coming out of our mouth, ultimately being considerate of that in our sharing. Ben?
We're getting some interesting things in the chat. I just want to briefly touch on this idea of self-deprecating is always being safe. Is that true? I think it depends on how safe you feel like making fun of yourself, right? Because that can get really dark. Like if you get, it's really how you do that. If you really are like, you know, there are people in my life where I'm like, just stop making fun of yourself. It's really kind of like narcissistic. So yeah, it's a safe target if you're doing it with love to yourself, right? I think that's really got to be behind if you're going to target anybody, right? Center, like, I actually like this person, unless you're making fun of the president, in which case, go for it. Hard. That's basically.
Then I will add, Joe, to that sometimes people do self-deprecating as an apology. Right? So they're couching it like I'm being self-deprecating, but it really like reads like I'm apologizing for myself, right? It's like there's something under it, which is actually an apology for yourself. And I think the audience can tell, right? And I think that's the piece to navigate. Like, so I think that it is, and I think there's an opportunity to be able to laugh at yourself, which is a difference between, I can laugh at myself, which has a sense of humor over yourself and we're not wallowing it. And then this like self-suffering, self-identifying, you know, I'm horrible, I'm really bad at this type of thing that can wear. And all rules are meant to be broken. There are some people who do that highly effectively, and that's their shtick and it really works, but that doesn't work for everybody.
Rodney Dangerfield made a whole career out of it, right? I'm such a schmuck, everyone hates me. You can, there's money in it. You can find a way to do it. But just be careful with yourself psychologically, because it can get a little iffy. We're at time, you guys. Thank you so much for coming to visit Sparkalation. I have so much elevated Sparkalation all over me.
So thank you so much, Ben, for this fabulous conversation on putting the comedy in our public speaking. There's nothing to it. As we pivot and shift into our next conversations here in our Fearless chat, knowing that we are entering into, we are less than 30 days away from the election, the next series of conversations we're having are framing a context for the world that we're in at the moment. So the next conversation is going to be led by Maria Ewan. She runs an amazing nonprofit called Issue Voter. And what they do is you sign up and they tell you what bills are actually being voted on in Congress. And you say yes or no, and it goes immediately to the legislative assistant for your congressperson. So it literally is a way of communicating directly to your representatives in Congress, so you know exactly what the bills are that they're voting for as they're coming in. So it's a real opportunity for you to be in the driver's seat of your democracy. So she's going to be speaking about voting. She's a child of Chinese immigrants. And again, that is issue and party agnostic. They just say, this is the issue, this is a yes and the no. How do you vote? So that's very powerful. Then we have Jennifer Brown, who runs Jennifer Brown Consulting. She's one of the leaders in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So we're going to be having a conversation around that. And then Dr. Maisa Akbar, who talks about trauma and urban trauma and racial equity specifically. We're going to be speaking about that. And that's going to be the last conversation in October. And then I may cry. No matter what happens on November 3rd, we are going to hold sacred space. We are going to hold space for each other as a community. On that Thursday, we are going to gather. I know there are people on this call who are not Americans, so thank you for being with us, you know, as we are navigating that. So for our Australians and our South Americans, you know, so wherever we are, wherever we find ourselves, we will hold communal space on that Thursday. We have some people, we may be singing, we may be moving, we may just be however we greet ourselves. we will be holding space collectively and then gearing up for whatever the world holds on beyond November 3rd. With that, I just want to thank you so much for joining us in our Fearless chat, for choosing to be with us on this Thursday, on the week Sunday of National Coming Out Day, honoring and celebrating the lesbian voices that we did in our presentation. And there is a final activity that we have to complete our circle. We know that it is time. We are a couple minutes beyond. So if you have to go, we get that you've got to go. Thank you so much for being with us. And if you can stay for a moment or so, we do have a little final completion exercise that we have. So I'm going to allow everyone to kind of filter out who needs to leave. Okay, beautiful. So the way that this works is this is an opportunity where we just kind of see and acknowledge everyone who's on the call. So what you do is you see somebody on the call, you say their name, and you say, I see you, and I thank you. And then from that, we move on to the next person. The opportunity and the invitation is to raise your hand so that we can see that you are here, and then we don't call the same person over and over again. So again, we're gonna do you'll get into the hang of it very quickly. So Hunt, I see you, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, it's great to be here. I'm happy. Dottie, I see you. And I'm very happy that I get to see you and your wonderful glassware behind me.
It's all my antiques. Thank you, Hunt. Admira, I see you, and thank you for participating tonight.
Thank you, Dottie. Ben, I see you, and I'm grateful you didn't quit today.
Me too. It's a very tough time economically. Billy Joe, I see you and your screen behind you, and I thank you so much for coming on a Thursday night. Thank you for being here.
Linda, I see you, and thank you so much for sharing this.
Thank you, Billy Joe. Eduardo, I see you, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. Jesus Aguilera, I see you, and I thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Eduardo. So Deborah, I see you, and I thank you for being here and for being free like a bird, free as a bird.
Thank you. Flying for us all. Sophia, I see you. I appreciate you. Thank you for being with us in our community today.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Valerie. I see you, and I see the beautiful flowers behind you, and I appreciate you participating and joining us today.
Thank you, Sophia. And my dear Lori, I see you, I thank you, and I appreciate you.
Oh, how nice, Valerie. I'm so grateful. And I think that's everyone. So I see everyone, and I thank you so much. Ben, this was amazing. You are hilarious.
Yes. Thank you all so much. We will see you next week. Thank you very much. Bye.
Go home. Go home. Bye. All right.